Over to you, Paul.
More, thank you very much, Declan. I was about to say good morning, but it's now afternoon. So,
Yeah,
so good afternoon, everybody. Sorry, Declan. Just before we go any further, would you mind allowing me to share the screen so I can put up the slides?
I sure will. Hold on there.
Yeah, thanks very much. Yeah, we're good. Super. Okay, thanks, Declan. Okay, is everybody able to see my screen?
No, you should see a black. Oh, now we can see
No,
it.
no,
Yeah,
no,
yeah.
we do. Super. Okay, great, super. Okay, afternoon, everybody. Great to get the opportunity to talk to you. And I suppose I'm under the most pressure to finish on time, given I'm between you and the weekend. So I will do my very best to make that happen. So my name is Paul Daly, and I'll be taking you through the credit management side of the course. Let me see. I'm not currently working in the credit and collections world. I took a sidestep a number of years ago and stayed there. But if we go back, I started my credit and collections journey. I suppose it's over 20 years ago now. Unfortunately, it doesn't feel like that long, but it is. So I did a year in Oracle, and I made pretty much every mistake that the notes said don't make. Okay, so because I predated my attending this course. Um, so pretty much every mistake that you're not supposed to do, we did it as a team. Did a year in Oracle, moved on and did a year and a bit in Philips. Much more successful there because I'd learned all the mistakes in my first year. Then I moved to Accenture, and then for the next 12 and a half years, I was working on one of their diamond clients. So a good 14, 15 years worth of experience behind me in the credit and collections world. So did every line of business, did every part of geography, broke the model up and put it back together a couple of times. Did a couple of years in risk, and the rest of my time there would have been primarily on the collections side of things. And then most importantly of all, back in I think it was 2008, I was sitting where you were sitting there, although it was not a virtual world back then. We were in a classroom. So I am one of Declan's former students. Okay, and I've been working with Declan for the last kind of 10 plus years or so on the course. Okay, so great to get the opportunity to meet you, and looking forward to working with you over the next 15 weeks. Okay. So what we're going to do this morning is I'm going to take you through, I suppose, a whistle stop tour of what it is we're going to be doing over the next 15 weeks. I'm not going to go into any massive detail, although I will throw one or two anecdotes in there and one or two little stories maybe as we're going along, because it just kind of livens things up and breaks up the constant flow of information. If I can add a story or a little bit of insight as we're going along. So do that, and aim to finish up, as Declan said, at latest 1 o'clock, and ideally a little bit earlier than that. Okay. So we have a 15-week journey ahead of us. So week one, which as Dara said is not this coming Monday, but the Monday after, we're going to start with your approach to credit. Okay, so we're going to cover off a few things in relation to, and we're going to ease you in a little bit. It's not the longest of the modules or the most intense of them, but we're going to ease you in a little bit in terms of what it is that credit management involves. And I suppose the first key message to kind of take away is that you can have the best collections team in the world, or you yourself can be the best collector in the world. That will itself will only get you so far. Okay, you do need to control not just the collections piece of the puzzle, but also a lot beyond, and even a little bit after. Certainly, a lot of steps before the collectors become involved, and maybe even a couple of steps afterwards. Okay, so we're going to introduce you to what is known as the attack model. Okay, and first A stands for assessment. The first T stands for terms and conditions. The second T stands for teamwork. The second A stands for administration. The C stands for, not too surprisingly, collections. And then the K stands for KPIs and reporting. Okay. So, even just that as an example, the six letters in there, and the C only represents one of them. So what it's beginning to give you, we'll take you through all of those steps, but what it begins to give you is a little bit of an insight as to how much of the order to cash process you need to be involved in, or you need to monitor, at the very least, keep an eye on to make sure it's working in order to be successful in your collections activities. And a lot of this course is all about it's about managing risk, but it's also about getting paid on time, and that's always the prize that we're keeping at least one eye on as we're going along. Okay. We're going to talk to you about the impact of delaying on action. So when you invoice, your expectation is that 100% of your debt is going to be recoverable and that you're going to get paid, because otherwise, why would you invoice in the first place? But if you allow 60 days to go by, which I suppose it's a little bit of time, but if you allow 60 days to go by, only 80% of that debt is normally typically collectible. Okay, so for every thousand you build, you're now only going to collect 800 of it. The other 200 you're probably not going to receive. Okay. If you allow it to go 6 months, so it gets to 180 days, only half of it is going to be recoverable. So every thousand you bill, you're now down to 500. And then if you go all the way to 360, which is a year, only 10% of your ledger is potentially going to be recoverable. So that shows you, I mean, one of the recurring themes throughout these notes is the importance of speed. Okay. We're going to talk to you about consumer credit. Okay, so if you're working in that area, we'll focus a bit on that. I suppose we start with the kind of trade credit, but we're going to move into consumer credit as it goes along in week one. Not only is that useful if you're working in the area, it is also useful for you as a consumer. Okay, we're going to go through a number of scenarios and say, okay, in that scenario, a loan is maybe appropriate. In the other scenario, using your credit card is appropriate. If you're buying a car, whether you should finance, whether you should get a loan, whether you should be involved in PCP. So not only are you likely to come away from the course with an awful lot of good tips and tricks and ideas as to how to proceed in your working environment, you may also get a few tips and tricks in week one as to how to proceed as a consumer as well. Okay, so if you're going to be a customer and you're going to avail of credit, the correct type of credit for the scenario that you find yourself in, and how to go about repaying it will be covered off in week one as well. All right. So I'll do a couple of these and I'll pause every now and again just to see if people have any questions. So week two is credit policy. Okay. So some of you may know what a credit policy or know what a credit policy is already. Others of you may be saying, okay, what exactly is a credit policy? So a credit policy is essentially a playbook and a list of rules for how to engage in your credit and collections activities. So I suppose, picture a scenario, you're working in collections, it's Monday morning, it's November, it's wet, it's dreary, and you log on and you do as you probably should do, which is check the bank account, and your biggest customer was supposed to pay you on Friday, and you let out a sigh and maybe something more, because you have not received the largest payment that you were expecting on Friday evening. Okay, it's not there. Okay, and your attitude is, okay, listen, I'm fed up with that customer. They've done it to me before. I'm worn out. I'm going to put that account on hold and I'm going to put it on hold right now. Okay. So that's an understandable reaction, but it may not be the best way of doing business, because the reality is you may not be putting it on hold because it's the right thing to do. You may be putting it on hold because it's Monday morning, it's pouring rain outside, and you're a bit fed up. Okay. So what it is there's a rule book and it's a playbook that kind of says, okay, under these circumstances, this is the way we're going to react. Under these circumstances, this is the way we're going to react. It covers a number of different activities, not just collections, but also increasing credit limit, putting accounts on hold, the reporting, the structure of your credit collections activity. So we're going to take you through all of those type of things. Okay. We're going to tell you we're going to explain to you the difference between a liberal and a conservative credit policy. So a liberal credit policy says that, okay, listen, we're starting off our business. We have some investment. We have some money to spend. We need to grow our business. We're going to be flexible and, maybe give generous credit terms, maybe generous lines of credit, and we're going to proceed in that manner because we're trying to grow our business. A conservative credit policy would be the reverse, okay? Where you might say you basically don't need to extend kind of credit. Maybe your business model is so brilliant that the customers are going to be queuing with the cash in hand up front. So you might say, okay, well, listen, we don't need to extend. We may extend credit terms in very exceptional cases, but in general, we don't need to extend credit terms. So we're going to be conservative in our approach, and we're going to take you through a sample credit policy. So all of the ins and outs and all of the things that are contained in the credit policy, we're going to take you through them and explain to you what they are and show you. If you have a credit policy, it'd be a good time to dust off the credit policy and compare it against the notes to see how it matches up. If you don't have a credit policy, it may be a good opportunity for you to suggest that one might be written, because it allows for a consistent approach to credit and collections. Yeah, it's not that you can't vary it. You will vary it in certain circumstances. You may not treat a customer that's going to spend 1 million with you the same way you're going to treat somebody who's going to spend 5,000 with you. There's nothing wrong with adopting different approaches depending on business, but it's to give you an idea as to adopt some element of consistency throughout as to how you will manage your credit collections activities. Okay, so we'll do one more and then I'll pause in case there's any questions. So week 3, we're going to do credit terms and lines of credit. Okay, so we're going to talk to you. Sorry, it's sorry. The top is actually missing off. Top is actually missing off there because I have a ribbon there on top. But it also covers off terms and conditions. Okay, so terms and conditions. We're going to talk you through what terms and conditions are, what should be included in them, and what are some of the common mistakes that you see in relation to terms and conditions when they're created. A lot of times they're too long. Okay, you don't, you're trying to, a dispute comes up and you say to the customer, okay, but sure, that was covered on page 91, subsection 5, section 2, and the customer said, you got to be kidding me, it was 91 pages long, so I didn't bother reading that. So you do have scenarios where credit terms and conditions are too long. You will also have scenarios where terms and conditions are too short. Okay, so if a scenario arises where there's a dispute between you and the customer and you have not documented it in your terms and conditions, it can become problematic because the likelihood is you've got a stalemate. And if you have a stalemate, you're almost certainly going to have delays in terms of payments. Okay, customer believes they're right, you believe you're right, and there's nothing to prove, nothing that was signed or agreed by anybody to prove otherwise. Okay, so you have two different points of views, and chances are nobody's going to shift. Okay. We're going to talk to you about the difference between credit terms and credit limits, or to use the term that we like to use a bit more, lines of credit. Okay, so the line of credit is how much we're going to extend to our customers and allow them to avail of in terms of a line of credit before we say, okay, you're over the credit limit, or before we maybe initiate another review. The credit terms are how long people have before they pay. Do they have 30 days, 45 days, 60 days, 90 days, or whatever? And we're also going to cover off what exactly are your terms of credit, okay? Because a lot of times when you stop people and they say, well, what are your credit terms? They'll say, well, it's 30 days. I said, but is that 30 days from the date of the invoice? Is it the date the invoice was received? Is it the date the product was received? Is it from the end of the month, the beginning of the month? When exactly does the 30 days kick in? Okay. So we're going to share some tips and tricks as to how you nail that down and how you make it a lot nice and clear, and you agree it from the beginning with the customer, because you are in competition with companies for their money. Okay, so you better believe if the customer thinks that 30 days could be applied to date of receipt of product or end of month or beginning of the next month, they will certainly apply that and say, well, they'll push it and say, well, let's try that because I don't have enough money to pay this month. Okay. We're going to talk you through also factors that you can take into account when you're setting your credit terms. Some cases you may set them quite generously because you're trying to grow your business, as I said earlier. You may set them quite generously. Your whole reason for granting credit is to sell more. So if by giving people 30 days, 60 days, 90 days, you feel you can sell more, it may well be the right approach. If on the other hand, to use the example I often use in these lectures would be U2 tickets. If you're selling tickets to a U2 concert, you probably don't need to offer terms of credit. Okay, people will use credit because they will buy it on credit cards, but that's between them and the credit card company. You, as Ticketmaster, who are selling tickets to U2, you probably don't need to offer terms of credit because you can sell out Croke Park or the Viva or wherever multiple times over. So yeah, need people with cash in hand or credit cards in hand. You don't need to offer credit terms. Okay. So we'll cover that. We'll also take you through, okay, how much can I trust the customer with and how long am I going to trust them for? Those are the type of things we're going to be covering off. So good meaty section in the third week in week 3. Okay. So I'm going to pause there for a moment, take a sip of water. Does anyone have any questions before I move on to week 4? No? Okay, very good. All right. So week 4 is managing your data. Okay. So what we're going to advise you in week 4 is how to take a proper record of the calls that you're making. What is the type of information you need to capture, and not just on the calls, but also data beyond that. What and where do you need to store your contracts, your delivery notes, your invoices, your statements, things like that. Okay. We're going to talk you through why proper record keeping is very important. Okay, it's important first of all from an efficiency and continuity point of view. If you work for a large organization, which I just happen to always have, um, and you're dealing with other large organizations, or other large organizations are your customers, which to a certain extent I always have as well. You're not necessarily going to be always dealing with the same person. Okay, so it's not a case of Paul is ringing Declan to always collect the money. I mean, it may well be, and it is certainly a positive step in the relationship if Paul is always ringing Declan or Declan is always ringing Paul. But the fact is, Declan will take holidays, Paul will take holidays, Paul might move on, and so on. So, from efficiency and continuity point of view, record keeping is very, very important. Okay, because that way, if somebody is out and it becomes a key day, and maybe it's month end, and next steps need to be taken in order to progress steps, keeping in mind back what I said at the beginning, that speed is important. It is important to be able to continue efficiency and continuity, even if the actual collector or the accounts payable represented on the customer side is not actually in the office. Okay. It does allow for accuracy in terms of payment tracking and also dispute resolution. Okay, so payment tracking and also dispute resolution tend to involve commitments on one side or the other, that certain things will be resolved and they'll be fixed, or this is what we said we would do, and this is when we said we would do it. Repeating again that you're regularly in competition for the customer's cash. It is important that if a commitment is made for, say, Friday, that it is noted down that it is happening on Friday, and that the person reading it and the person who wrote it can stand over and say, no, I know it was Friday, and maybe back it up in an email or something like that. But it is important that they're able to rely on the information that's there, because, as I said, the customer gets wind that there may be some doubt, said, oh well, he or she is always putting in the wrong information, so maybe it's not right. That automatically gives them an opportunity to extend their credit terms that little bit further, which may be the difference between them paying on time and not paying on time. So tracking of that and managing that data is very important. It's also very important from a proof of consent and also for audit trails. Okay, so in this, again, GDPR type world, if you've agreed to something, if you've agreed for your data to be kept and maintained, it is important that we have evidence of that if a dispute ever comes up. And also from an audit trail point of view, clear records. It is important. It is an important function of a company to be able to get their money in a reasonably speedy time frame. Okay, if you think back, I better not name any names, but if you think back to the days of the crash, for those of you who would have been working back then. There was a scenario where the key person in an organization which got bailed out by the taxpayers, famously didn't use a computer. Okay, the person took notes on kind of pen and paper the whole time. Everything was just noted down in various kind of notebooks or something like that. So it may have been something that actually helped the individual out, because it may have been rather difficult to prove that the person did certain things wrong that people suspected they did. But it probably in the longer term is not necessarily a best way of doing business. So from an audit trail point of view, very important to be able to put your hands on evidence and stuff, because it is a key responsibility of a company to be able to collect their money in a reasonable time frame. Okay. Week 5, we're going to cover off sources of information. So part of the assessment stage of the process is managing the risk and assessing the risk. And it is important to know we're not in the business of minimizing risk, okay, which may be a common misconception, and once upon a time would have been one I had myself. We're in the business of managing risk, okay, so taking calculated risks and managing it and doing it the right way, based on data and not just kind of gut feels, is part of our job. Okay, it's not our job. We can minimize risk tomorrow by just blocking every order. We say, okay, we're going to block every order, or block every order for anybody who ever paid late. So you could adopt that rationale, and yeah, you will minimize risk, but you're also going to minimize the company's profits. Okay. Source of information is what we cover off in week 5. So this allows us to assess whether or not doing business with companies or lines of credit or credit terms. It gives us the information to make that decision. So where can we get the information from? One place we can get it from is websites. Okay, there are a number of useful websites that we will share with you. Things like credit bureau websites, links to check if there's been judgments made against companies or individuals. Registration sites where you can check where the company has been registered and that the company has been registered and who the directors are and things like that. Basic information like that, we'll direct you to that. And then there's also kind of business and kind of media websites where you can kind of read information about, okay, well, how is the company doing at the moment? If the company is constantly in court fighting off judgments, or is has just last week sought examinership, or is maybe, if there's rumors that they may be heading to liquidation or something like that, that's the type of information that'd be useful. So there's a number of links we'll share with you in the notes that you can use to source information. A key source of information in I suppose, maybe a less dramatic world that you will use in every case is your credit application forms or your new business application forms. Again, the wording that we use is very, very important to I suppose put a positive spin. So new business sounds a little bit more positive than credit application form. So, but credit application form is a very, very useful source. I mean, you will look for basic information like the company name, or the individual's name, and then contact details and various other things. I mean, for me, there's three things that we're looking out for in the trade side anyway. We're looking out for, okay, is there information or other questions that we're asking that will give us a good indication as to how risky it is to do business with the customer? Do we have plenty of contact details so if things go wrong, can we call the company, and can we follow up in terms of payment? And then also try to remove as many excuses as we can. Let's ask them, okay, how do you want your statements? How do you want your invoices? Do you use POs? Things like that. There's things we can ask there that makes it just a little bit harder for them to later rely on and say, well, oh, well, I have a PO system. And say, well, it says here you don't. So, those are kind of the types of things and types of information. There's probably a good 100 bits of information you could ask from the credit application form. I'm probably not going to ask all of it, but great place to get it. And we're also going to beginning to talk to you a little bit as we move more towards the kind of credit and risk area as we go on the later into the course. We're going to ask you a little bit, we're going to talk to you a little bit about how to start setting lines of credit based on the references, the trade references you may have gathered in relation to the application, what the customer's payment performance has been in the past, if they're a returning customer, and also the business need. Okay, the whole aim of a credit is to sell more. Okay. And there will be occasions where selling more does not require you to offer any terms of credit. I mean, if you think there's a market that's not too far from me, it's not on at this time of year, but it will be reopening again very soon. But there is a very successful pancake business that's there in the market. You don't get called a week later asking you to pay for your pancake, okay? Because it's not going to be cost effective for them to do it, okay? They look for cash up front. So cash up front, in certain circumstances, is the best way to go. In terms of maybe something like a car dealership, offering some form of credit is probably a better way to go because you will sell more cars if you can do that. Okay. So I'll pause there for a moment. That brings us up to week 6. Any questions there? No, we're good. Okay. So week 6 is going to be your first assignment, which I think brings us to in and around Easter time. Okay. So that's going to be your first assignment. Okay. So there's a week off from the lectures. All right. And then we come to week 7, far side of Easter, which is right first time. Okay. So big meaty kind of section here. So we really begin to thrash out the benefits of not looking at not just the collections area, but also all areas of what is known as the order to cash process, which is a term you may be very, very familiar with, or you may have heard of, or you may be hearing for the first time. But the entire order to cash process, which is basically everything from the order being placed all the way to payment being received, and not just being received, but correctly allocated to the correct account and the correct invoice, so that the debt is discharged. So pretty much the very first thing we do in Right First Time is we give you a list of questions and we say, okay, in terms of your company, do you have a way of identifying customers that you can sell to? Do you have a way of contacting them? Do you have a plan in terms of how often you will contact them? If they place an order, how do you turn that into an invoice? How do you get that invoice onto the statement? How do you make sure the statement and the invoice reach the customer so they know it's due? And various other steps all the way through to the end of the order to cash process. And what that is basically saying is if the answer to any of those questions is, well, I'm not sure, or yeah, I sort of do, but it's not exactly a overly open and shut kind of bit to the process, anything there, that's an opportunity for something to go wrong. Okay. And if something goes wrong, not just in the collections, I mean, poor collections can be driven by collectors kind of maybe not contacting customers enough, or maybe saying the wrong things when they do contact them. But a lot of times it's to do with something that happens earlier in the process, or sometimes even a little bit later in the process. So that's where things go wrong. Okay. If any of you have ever dealt with kind of accounts where there's a kind of a reconciliation mess, that's an example of where things have gone wrong after the money. So money has come in, but it just may not have been allocated to the right place, or not everything has been paid, and and it's hard to see the woods for the trees and why things haven't been paid. So getting things right first time is a very important, regardless of whether it's within your own part of the business or somewhere else, is a very, very important part of on-time collection. So we're going to take you through very, very good, very important topic there in week 7. We're going to take you through all of that. Okay. The last kind of little bits and pieces that we will also focus on in week 7 is we will focus on invoices. Okay, how to get your invoices right. Okay, how to have the right amount of information, enough information on there so the customers can pay it, but not so much information that the person in accounts payable is absolutely bombarded with stuff. I mean, if you're selling kind of code or something like that to a customer, if you're working in kind of an IT kind of business, putting an entire list of kind of almost the formula to create the code and saying, right, that's what you owe me for, is probably not the best way to ensure payment. Probably better to kind of say this is for code that you purchased on the following date. It was purchased by this individual. Here's the PO number. That type of information will speed up your payment. Okay. We'll talk to you about how to make your statements look good. Okay. And make them most effective. The best way to do it is to have both current and overdue, and not have all of the little columns of 0 to 60, 30 to 60, 0 to 30s, 30 to 60, 60 to 90, and all the way through. And we're also going to talk to you about credit notes, and also, most importantly, the analysis of credit notes. So if credit notes are being issued, something has gone wrong. We're going to talk to you a bit about analyzing what has gone wrong and pulling it all together and finding out why it's gone wrong. And most importantly, what can you do to prevent it happening in the future? Okay. So that's week 7. Week number 8 is opening new accounts. Okay, so what we're going to cover off there is this is the beginnings of the kind of credit and risk assessment, which we'll cover off for maybe 3 or 4 weeks, kind of on the trot here. Okay, so the credit risk assessment, we're going to be talking to you about the different legal entities. Okay, so what's the difference between a sole trader and a limited company? At a very high level, the answer is that the sole trader is the business, whereas a limited company is not the business. It's run by directors, but the directors are not part of the business. So if the directors own nice cars, they're in the name of the director, you can't use those nice cars to discharge the debt. If the sole trader has a nice car and he or she is the company, you can in theory go after the nice car or the nice house on the hill and use that to discharge the debt. So at a very, very, very high level, let's give you an insight as to what the differences are between the different legal entities. We're going to talk to you about trade application forms and new customer application forms. Covered that off a minute ago, so I'm going to go into a bit more depth here in week 8, but I won't cover it off in any more detail here in the interest of time. We're going to talk to you a bit more about trade references as well. What is it that we're looking out for? What are we trying to find out? Who should we contact? How many should we get? And how to go about it in terms of kind of trying to get the best insight as to whether or not this is an on-time payer, or is this a company that is going to drive you mad and create a lot of work for your collections team, and ultimately maybe leave you with an overdue debt? We'll take you through consumer application forms, which I haven't spoken to you too much about, so maybe I'll pause on that for a moment. Consumer application forms focus a lot on, I mean, they are different to trade application forms. They focus a lot on money coming in and money going out. Okay. That's the key thing that the bank, if you're applying for a loan, is interested in. They said, okay, so Paul has, I don't know, say 3,000 coming in every month. 1,000 goes there. He's got children and they're in creche, so 1,000 goes there. Does Paul have enough money to pay us back 100, 200, 300, 400 a month on top of the bills that he already has? Okay, so those are the type of things that the banks or whoever it is that's extending credit to you is looking for. Okay, and towards the end of week 8, we're going to give you a good process in terms of managing risk levels. Okay, we have a very good exercise there, whereby you can start putting kind of some hidden code in your credit limits, so that you can see, okay, is this a very risky customer? Is this a medium risk customer, or is it a low risk customer? So that in an instant, whenever you see an account and somebody says, okay, there's an order to be released, do you recommend releasing the order or not? Without going off and doing hours work of research, which in certain circumstances is appropriate, but without doing that, you can still get a good idea as to whether or not whether or not an account is high risk, medium risk, or low risk. Okay. All right. Okay. So that is week 8. I'll pause there for a moment. Any questions? What am I doing for time? Okay, I got max of 20 minutes left. Okay. So week 9. Week 9 is certainly a very meaty topic, and I'll try and get through it relatively quickly, just in the interest of time. So what we're covering off in week 9 is we're going to cover off how to read a set of accounts. Okay. And we're going to cover off profit and loss and balance sheets. Okay. So we're going to start getting into the actual numbers piece of the work. Okay. So profit and loss account give you, as the name suggests, gives you a good idea as to whether or not a company is trading profitably or not. Can be perfectly acceptable for a company not to be trading profitably on one particular year, as long as there's a good reason behind it. But what the profit and loss accounts will give you, particularly in the case of bigger companies, is it'll give you an opportunity to delve a little bit into the story. So if the company is trading at a loss, and you see, okay, maybe they run at a loss because they bought an entire new plant this year, so they had to pay for that, and they bought it all up front because there were positive factors that allowed them to do that. It'll give you a bit more of an idea as to the story behind the profit and loss. But if you're seeing loss after loss after loss, and you're seeing 3 or 4 years of accounts, that could be explainable, but it's probably a little bit more worrying. Okay. So we start talking to you a little bit about how you start reading profit and loss accounts. Okay. Balance sheets is the one that tends to come along with the profit and loss accounts. Balance sheets give you a snapshot in time as to how a company is performing, give you an opportunity to see, among other things, you get an opportunity to see, okay, what sort of assets does the company have? I mean, if a company is trading at a loss but has assets all over the place, the overall risk is maybe a little bit lower than if you say, okay, they're trading at a loss, and do they own much? Actually, not an awful lot, but it gives you a good snapshot. And in larger companies, it might even give you a bit of an insight into the debtors ledger. So you might have an idea, okay, how good are this company at collecting the debts from their customers? Because that will have a key part as to whether or not they're going to be able to pay you on time or not. We're going to talk to things like stock valuations, which could be useful if things go wrong and you may have to go in and start kind of grabbing stock. It's not quite as straightforward as that, but in theory, you may go in and start grabbing stock in order to discharge the debt. Very key part that the reading the accounts will show you is it'll give you an idea as to the trading or cash operating cycle, and how good is the company in terms of managing their money? How quickly is money coming in and going out? Okay. A good example that I heard on the radio not that long ago is somebody who's making Hurleys, okay, and they have a scenario where kind of wood is ordered and it arrives and it sits in a pile, and it might sit in a pile for workshop maybe for a couple of weeks, okay. That's stock that is not generating money, okay. It's sitting there. It's been paid, probably been paid for, depending on whether it's cash up front or credit terms, may have been paid for, sitting there. Ideally, and now it may only take 30 minutes to make the Hurley, but ideally what you would have at the other end is somebody banging on the garage door to buy the Hurley, giving you cash up front as soon as it's ready. But if they are piling up, if the Hurleys in turn are piling up in the corner, then that suggests maybe a slower cash operating cycle. If we go back to the pancake house example that I had earlier, that market stall might be buying eggs, flour, and milk on a Friday. They then generate a load of pancakes on a Saturday. It's all cash up front, and they have, by Saturday night, they have the money back. Okay, so not only have they been able to pay off for the things that they bought, they also have profit. So that's an example of maybe a shorter one. So that's kind of an easy example, but just to give you an insight as to the type of thing you'd be looking out for. How good are they at managing that kind of stuff? We'll also talk to you about cash forecasting, okay? Because that's a report that certainly larger companies do generate, and you can get a look at. We'll talk to you about the impact of VAT on forecasting, because VAT is not spread evenly throughout the year. It kind of comes in one big kind of glump payment, and which can modify the results on particular months. And we'll also explain to you what liquidity ratios, profitability ratios, and management efficiency ratios are. So liquidity ratios are key to ensuring that there is cash available for the company. Profitability ratios are more medium term and saying, okay, well, longer term, is the company profitable or is it not? And then management efficiency ratios gets into things like how much money is each individual making? Is the company severely overstaffed? And there's an awful lot of people in the company not making an awful lot of money. That would be a warning sign for you. So we're going to take you through those kind of ratios. You can compare, are they going up or down from one quarter to the next or 1 year to the next, and you can also have a look and also compare them against other companies in the industry to see, okay, are they performing well or are they performing poorly against their competitors? Okay. All right, so that takes us to week 9, and then week 10 is an assignment, which is I think that's assignment number 2, which I think is on collections, if I remember correctly. All right. Any questions on that before we move to week 11, which is international collections? Okay. So international collections. So a bit of a sidestep on this one. We're gonna cover off an area which is very, very close to my heart because I've never actually worked in for a company in the Korean collections area that has only done domestic collections. It's always been international. Okay, so Ireland has always been one of the countries, but we've always been dealing with other countries as well. So definitely an area, particularly the second bullet point there, which we'll talk about in a minute. Definitely an area close to my heart. So we're going to talk to you about why firms internationalize. Okay, so the short answer is to make money. Okay, and I suppose if you were to take an example, if you could come up with a product that every man, woman, and child on the island of Ireland was going to want or need, your maximum the maximum number of units, and let's say they all want one. I suppose the closest example might be a mobile phone. But you come up with that and you say, okay, let's get one of these to every man, woman, and child in the country. Including Northern Ireland, you'd probably be able to get it to about maybe 7 million people. Okay, and then you're finished. Okay, you're not going to be able to do any more. But when you keep in mind that there's probably 7, 8, 9 billion people in the world, there's an awful lot more market out there that you could potentially go after. So that's a good reason to internationalize. Another reason for internationalizing is to maximize whatever investment or output you have. I mean, if you've come up with a new software license, only selling it to the people of Ireland is potentially not, and let's say it costs you 1 million to come up with the software license, 1 million was spent on developing it. If you only sell it to the people of Ireland, the number of licenses you're going to sell is significantly lower than if you expand to the UK, which has maybe the guts of 10 times our population, France, which maybe has maybe another 10 times our population, and so on. Or just if you stay within the European Union, you can expand from from 7 million people to maybe 300 million people. So your opportunities to make money are significantly better as long as you're brave enough to go beyond the borders. Okay. We're going to talk to you about how to do business in different countries. Okay, so we're going to cover off the top 10 largest countries in the world in terms of doing business and tell you some of the differences in terms of doing business. Good example being if you do business in the US and you attend a business meeting, people will kind of bound on over and immediately look to find out all about you. Okay, if you do business in a different part of the world, maybe in parts of Asia, people will be a little bit more reserved, and you will need to work with them in a slightly different manner. If you're waiting for somebody in the US, if you're waiting for somebody in the US to kind of ask you to go and sell yourself, you may be waiting quite some time. On the other hand, if you use the US model where you might be maybe just a little bit on the boastful side, that may go down badly in Eastern European countries. So we're going to talk to you, and there's things like punctuality, how to run meetings, how to make collections phone calls. We're going to take you through all of that for some of the largest countries in the world in week 11. And then we're going to talk to you about the risks of doing business internationally, which are currency risk, whereby you may lose money on the conversion of your currencies if you're going outside of the Eurozone. Cross-cultural risk, which is the one I just explained, where you may make, I suppose, faux pas, if you want to call it that, by dealing with people in the wrong way. We'll also talk to you about political risk. sorry, country risk, where you have to deal with things like the risk of the actual physical environment of the country you're going to do business in. Is it a corrupt country? Is it a country where maybe hijackings of trucks is common? Things like that. And then the last one we're going to talk to you about is commercial risk, which is similar to the risk we have in Ireland. If you put the wrong marketing strategy, the wrong management team, the type of mistakes you can make in Ireland. But if you make them abroad, the consequences may be even more severe. So we're going to talk to you a bit about that in week 11. Okay, our max is 10 minutes to go. Any questions on that? No. Okay. So, I mean, if you go back to kind of weeks 8, 9, and 10, I mean, when you're talking about kind of things like the balance sheets and the gross profit and loss, there's you could be forgiven for kind of coming out of that and saying, okay, my God, the world is a very risky place, especially and then also week 11 where we call out four very important risks that you need to take into account if you're going to go international. You may be kind of saying, okay, is it worth doing business at all? Because the world seems to be a very, very risky place. But overall, yes, the answer is yes. And what we're going to talk to you about in week 11 is, okay, let's say you decide to embark on something very ambitious. There are a number of ways you can try and mitigate some of the risks that may come with it. Okay. One of them is contact strategies. Okay. So have a good collections team in place. Okay. So in the event that 30 days come and go, and they were your credit terms and the customer is not paid, that you have enough and skilled people who can call, email, write, whatever, to the customer in a very timely manner and say, okay, the debt is now due for payment. What are your plans to discharge the debt? So we're going to talk to you about some of the various different contact strategies you can have. We'll go a step further and say, okay, let's say you're going to go visit the customer, which obviously you're not going to do with all your customers, but you may look to do with some of your largest ones. We'll give you strategies in terms of how to have a successful customer visit. We're going to talk to you about documentary collections, so things like letters of credit and things like that you can get, which means that in the event that certain conditions have been met or in the reverse fail to be met, you can go to your bank and get the debt discharged. We'll give you a country by country legal guide, not for every country, obviously, but for some of the larger ones to some of their legal systems. Okay, what's the sort of documents you may be asked for if you're going to embark on a legal case against a customer in France or in Germany or in the UK. So we'll talk to you a bit about that. What's the process? How long is it likely to take? What sort of documents you need? That type of stuff. And we'll also talk to you about credit insurance, which you can also purchase and can be particularly useful if you're going to embark on enterprises in maybe countries in the world that might be seen to be a little bit riskier. Okay, you may be able to purchase, you may not in some cases, but yeah, insurance is insurance. But you may, in certain circumstances, be able to purchase credit insurance that says, okay, as long as you fulfill certain conditions and you chase the debt and so on, in the event that it all goes wallop, and obviously for a fee, the credit insurance company will potentially insure the debt, so you have an opportunity to collect it, even if you don't get it directly from the customer. Okay. So that's what we have for you in week 12. So we got, was it 4 more weeks to go? So week 13 is an assignment that I think is Dara's assignment on AI in week 13. Week 14, which is this is the last one where we have an actual lecture. Week 14 is reporting and KPIs. Okay, so you notice it may be a little bit shorter. We're trying to we ease you in, but we try to ease you out of the course as well because it's intense and it's busy. We don't make any apologies for that, but you will learn an awful lot on it. But the final section is reporting and KPIs. So we will talk to you about what gets measured gets done. Okay, so what are the types of things you should be measuring and how often should you be measuring them and what are the consequences if you don't measure them? So keeping the philosophy of what gets measured get done. If you don't look at the reports and you don't check your bank accounts and you don't pull information, if the stuff you're only pulling weekly that you should be checking daily, what are the consequences? So we'll give you an idea of what you should be checking, how often, how to do it, and what to do if it goes wrong. We'll talk to you. This is important especially from your own personal point of view, marketing the work that you do. Okay, Declan may have mentioned it in his introductory lection, but it's certainly a phrase he's mentioned before. That we're the ones that make money. Okay, everyone else costs money. We make money, so it's because we actually physically bring money into the business. So it is very important to market that. A lot of times, the connotations in collections and credit are, write-offs, overdues, negative things. Even DSO if it's going down, it's a good thing. Whereas a lot of times the charts in sales, the charts tend to be going up. So we're going to talk to you a little bit about how to change the mindset, how to change the marketing, even using words like lines of credit instead of credit limits do help things. And then the final thing we're going to take you through in that module is DSO calculation, okay, which at its very basic, you may be familiar with it, you may even be measured on it at the moment. I certainly have been in the past. I mean, at its most basic, it's asking you how quickly does it take to get paid, okay? If you do 10,000 euros worth of business every month, and your debtor's ledger is 25,000, that suggests that it's taking approximately 2.5 months for you to get paid. Okay, so your debtor's ledger is 25,000. You're doing an average of 10,000 a month. That means it's 2.5 months by the time the money comes in. If your credit terms are 60 days and you're getting them in 2.5 months, which is about 75, that's probably not bad. Okay, there's a good chance that's a reasonably good figure. If, however, your credit terms are 30 days and it's taking 75 to get in, that's not as good. There's certainly definitely some room for improvement. So we're going to talk to you about why we calculate DSO and how we calculate DSO in week 14. And then week 15 is your final assignment, which will encompass the credit management piece, the collections piece, and the AI piece that Tara brought you through as well. So a lot in it. It is very rewarding, and certainly based on some of the assignments that I read from some of the people working who were in the group that came before you. There's an awful lot of very positive things that people have brought into their organization. Both to make their lives easier, to get things paid on time, and to improve on the marketing of their job. So very much looking forward to working with you over the next 15 weeks.
Well done, Paul. I'm when you go through the content at that speed, yeah, there is an awful lot in it. And I'm sure a lot of people, you think of credit and collections. It is a huge area of business. And to me, the area of business that we should be looking at, again, back to the potential, is from you know, I think it begins not with the order or not with the invoice or not with the account. If we can push it back to when the salespeople get a lead, and then we can vet those leads to become prospects, to become customers, invoicing, billing, collections, allocations, administration. That whole sort of lead to cash cycle is the domain of credit control. And I think this course covers step by step by step, giving you a sort of overview of the business and knowing what needs to happen at each step. And I think that is the vital because I heard once where it said that the wise man does at first what the fool does at last. And the gas thing is they both do the same thing, just in a different order. And that's the difference between wisdom and stupidity. So for me, this course is going to show you the right way, the order, how to communicate that message, how to increase your importance within the organization, how to improve your results, and do it in as stress-free way as you possibly can. So I hope you've enjoyed this morning. We've 2 minutes to go. I'll stop recording now for everybody's benefit.